right, guys. Hey, how's everybody doing? This is our first Blessed Are the Geek vlog podcast thing. So we're going to put this out as a podcast, and it's going to be on our Facebook page as a blog. We are here at Reboot. Thought I would show you one of these awesome tokens. It's got Reboot's logo on it. I'm really, I love these tokens. Simple things that...
It's awesome because it also doubles as like a tiny, sorry about that, a tiny sort of coin-sized business card. You can be like, absolutely. Here's my location. Come and see me.
That's so cool. I never thought about that.
That's why the address is on them. Hopefully we never have to move, landlords.
Right.
Fingers crossed.
There you go. We're here to talk about Donkey Kong today.
We are.
And more specifically, people who play Donkey Kong.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a pretty big thing in nerd news. I mean, even if you're a nerd, you may not know about any of this.
Right.
You may have heard that there was a documentary about Donkey Kong, the arcade game, and maybe you heard there was a scuffle between some people and world record scores, but not entirely sure what went on. So let's start at the beginning.
Well, I think that, it's an older documentary now. I think its release date's 2009, 2010, but the King of Kong really it was right at the beginning of this return to retro arcade games. You saw a big surge in collecting and even in game values at that time. Stern was out of the game. There was no more pinball at that point, and you started seeing arcade bars make a steady sort of comeback.
Yeah.
And I think King of Kong was a big precipice of that. A lot of people started saying, hey, I remember those games, and I didn't know there was a world record available for that. It kind of took off. I mean, it billed well. It made its money back, and it's a good movie. I watched it. It's a good movie.
We talking about King of Kong?
King of Kong.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you've seen it.
Yeah, I watched it this morning.
Watched it
on
this
YouTube.
Morning.
You can watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, that and Nibbler are both they're good. They're good films for what they are. I have a little bit of background in film, so I watch it with a grain of salt. But
right,
that's just me. And they're enjoyable watches. I mean, they're well shot, they're well done, they're well produced. Just like any documentary, it's a story about people, true people. You just got to be careful. I think with a lot of documentaries, people think that that's the only truth, that it's almost like a news story. That's like you get all the perspectives, and you got to understand that it's a movie.
Yeah. So I had heard a lot about this documentary. People were telling me for years, like, you got to watch King of Kong. If you're into video games, you got to watch King of Kong.
Yep.
And it wasn't, and I still hadn't watched it when Billy Mitchell actually came here to your bar and played Donkey Kong.
Yep.
And
that machine right there, you can see Billy signed it. I don't know if you can see it in the video. Probably add some stills or something later. But Billy signed it when he set the high score on that machine. And I've had, ever since the news came out, I've had some vitriol towards it. People want me to take the score down and stuff off the wall, and I'm not going to do it. Oh yeah. But I mean, that's just
wow.
So
let's get into the nitty gritty. Like, why are people upset about Billy Mitchell? Well, what's up with that?
Well, I think, it's sort of a war of personalities. I think Billy's big thing is Billy's good at something, and he knows he's good at something, and it's sort of like if you're any kind of soccer fan, the World Cup's on right now. That's why I make the comparison. Ronaldo from Spain, I think, or Portugal. Who does he play for? I think Portugal or something.
Yeah, it's a sports
it's
ball
sort
thing.
of it's a sports ball thing. I know. But you watch him, and there's two camps of people who love Ronaldo because he's a magician at what he does. I mean, the guy's a physical magician. You can watch YouTube highlights of the guy and not know anything about soccer and be like, that man's a freak of nature.
Right.
And then there's the other camp that says, well, there's all this off the field stuff, and he's a jerk, and he is a womanizer and all these other things.
And they throw his personality into
right.
it.
And so they throw their personality
because of his personality.
Right. He's not a good player because he's a bad person because of the way he acts personally. I think that it's just how you approach people. Ronaldo is very much of the I am not a role model kind of guy. He'll tell you straight up, I'm not a role model.
Right.
My kids should not aspire to be me. I'm great at what I do, and I like being good at what I do, and I like the fame. That's who Billy is. He likes having the fame. I've met him personally a couple times, and a lot of people will say, well, he's patronized your bar and helped your business, so you're firmly in his camp, and I'm not. My relationship with Billy only goes back maybe a year and a half. I had not seen King of Kong before I met him.
Okay.
Yeah, I met him at last year's SFGE, and I didn't really have an opinion on the guy, and I was like, he's a little bit saucy. I mean, he knows what he's about, but he's pitching this King of Kong movie. it's odd because you've seen it. King of Kong kind of paints him in a villainous light.
Absolutely.
And yet he's pushing it. And
yeah.
Once you do some research into who Billy Mitchell is, and the movie brings up a little bit of his past, but if you Google him and actually read some research on him, the guy's been, famous for video games for basically his entire life. I mean, he's been doing it since he was 15. So he's born, bred, raised in it.
Right.
He was the first prodigal son of video games, like arcades. And people said, if there's a record to be broken, it's Billy Mitchell that's going to do it.
He'll handle it. Yeah.
He'll handle it. He was sort of that first superstar of games.
Right.
You have E-League now. You have all this new stuff that's making millions of dollars and has billions in global viewership total. Billy was the first guy that had that. He was the first guy for video games that was on Time Magazine's cover. Time did a issue for him.
First video game guy on Time Magazine.
And you got and Time Magazine in the 70s was huge.
Right.
That was it. That was the global standard. You had presidents on the cover of Time Magazine, and Billy Mitchell's been there.
Right.
So
it's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
Super big deal.
Ask your grandparents. It was a big deal to be on the cover.
Who's Billy Mitchell? Yeah.
Who is Billy Mitchell? They probably know who he is, or your parents if you're old enough. I think Billy's always been that guy, so he kind of revels in it.
So he has a background for being really good at arcade and video games.
Yep.
So by this time, he had already had the Nibbler score and had
the Donkey Kong score. He had the Donkey Kong.
Okay,
score.
So Nibbler was later.
He never had the Nibbler score. Nibbler's just another documentary.
Okay, I see.
I was confused then. Yeah, Nibbler's the first. So with the success of King of Kong, they decided to do the Nibbler movie.
Same guys?
I think it's the same guys. I'm not 100% sure. I've seen both documentaries. They're shot very similarly. I don't know a lot about the background of the guys that shot King of Kong. I know a little bit, but it's shot in very much a similar way, just because that's a billable product.
Right.
A lot of documentaries do that. Watch on Netflix now. There's 5 or 6 crime drama documentaries based on making a murderer. Yeah. Where they basically steal the format and say, we're going to follow this one case all the way through and give you all these twists and turns and never have an answer. So it's an artistic choice. You got to understand that a lot of people think that documentary filmmakers are these guys that are only in it to get the story out there. And true, a lot of them have a lot of their personal money, a lot of their personal time in, but they see it as an investment. These people, there are documentary filmmakers that's all they do. Like, it's a career choice.
I mean, what's his name? Fahrenheit 9/11 and somebody out there is like, oh, it's totally that guy. But
Alex
big guy
Jones
with a hat,
Yeah.
Forget his name.
Bowling for Columbine.
Anyway, whatever his name was. Michael something.
Michael
Moore.
Michael Moore.
There it is.
Thank you. You came to us.
People, that's how you do it. You come.
Yeah, that's how you do it. But there's money to be made at it, and a lot of money. Clever girl, very clever girl. But it's there's money to be made at it, so you have to see it as a money-making scheme. It follows the same story tropes as a movie. It's just, instead of being
whatever
based
somebody's
on
interest is,
right? It's not based on a real story. It is the real story.
Right.
But you can
from somebody's point of view.
From somebody's
okay. So
point of view.
So Billy Mitchell's known for video games, and he set this insanely high score on Donkey Kong. Do you remember what the world record was for the longest time? It was
996, 996, and they said, because for a long time, for 20 years, they said a million was impossible.
500 something.
Okay. 500 was the previous score, so they're at the Time
That's
Magazine.
What I'm saying is that his original world record score.
Well, his original world record score, the 900 score, was set at the Time Magazine shoot. So they went to, which is why Twin Galaxies is famous. They went to Twin Galaxies, and Twin Galaxies is like, we have this big board of scores. And so Time Magazine was doing the story on them, and they invited all the record holders in. And King of Kong covers this for a little bit.
And Twin Galaxies, for anyone listening who hasn't seen it before, is a website dedicated to video game world records.
Right. And they started off as a arcade in Minnesota, I believe. And their owner, Walter Day, made the decision that he was going to be the keeper of scores and that he was going to record all the scores he could record, and literally had like phone lines in, and people would call in. They would send him
crazy.
VHSs, and that was his passion. That's what he wanted to do. And Walter's, I've met Walter in real life. Been very lucky to meet a pair of these guys personally, and Walter's an incredible human being.
Was that the referee in the documentary?
Yes.
Okay.
So he's the referee in the documentary. If you watch Wreck-It Ralph, they rip off his image and they pay him nothing for it, by the way. But it's
no.
Walter Day, yeah. Walter's too nice of a guy to say it, but if this gets out to Disney, at least send Walter like a copy of the image, maybe just a digital print. Like, thanks, Walter.
Here's your avatar
give the guy
to use.
Well, I mean, at
very minimum.
Just send all the guy. Walter doesn't want anything, but you basically copy the guy's image, and that's a separate story.
Sure.
You don't pay him anything, but
So Billy Mitchell has this record high score, and then there's another guy who comes in and says, "That's not the world record high score. I can handle this."
Yes.
Steve Wiebe.
Yeah. A lot of people are Wiebe fans. King of Kong, he's the everyman hero, and it's awesome. Look, and Wiebe for everything the documentary shows, dude's got the skills. I mean, Wiebe's got the skills to thrill.
Sure, yeah.
Dude's got it.
His wife wanted to tell everybody he was really good with his hands.
Yeah,
which I
really
found
good
really
with his
interesting.
hands. If only all of our significant others could say
right?
that.
You know?
I know.
I love that she had to point that out.
Yeah.
He's always been really good with his hands. Really.
Really interesting. But I think the big thing to take away from this isn't, especially like this podcast or anything that comes out in the future, because we're kind of predicating this podcast on that from what I've seen at the panel and some other things, that some new information is going to start coming to light here in the next couple of years, and this is nothing against Wiebe. Wiebe's a man trying to break a score, and somebody decided to videotape his journey.
Right.
Granted, the people that are running the King of Kong documentary are childhood friends of Wiebe.
Yeah, I think that. I think if you go into watching the documentary with those eyes and knowing that his pals helped him put this documentary together, I think it might really change your opinion of the documentary.
The other thing is when you talk to Billy personally, if you go to things like, I met him at SFGE, and I've been 2 years now, and that's where he ran the panel this year, which is where some new information came to light, which is what this podcast is really about. We're going to get around to it, at least some of it. Some of it that I can speak of confidently.
Jeremy is a great storyteller. He weaves a great story, but you gotta follow him on
you
this
gotta follow the steps.
It's the scenic route.
It's the scenic route. We're at world 2-1 at this point, I think. Is that you have to understand that documentarians and filmmakers in general are out to tell a story, and they need antagonists. And once you talk to Billy personally, he's painted in a certain light, which is good for the film. It does what it needs to do for its characters. But things didn't really happen that way, and you got to understand too that film took 2.5 to 3 years to produce. So there's a lot of footage. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of personality at play. There's a lot of things that Billy in some ways probably did. Felt obviously like he wasn't treated fairly in certain things, so he stopped participating about a year in.
Again, knowing that, you can also see that in the documentary, because it seems to me that every aspect of the documentary was filmed after the fact.
Yes.
Nothing was filmed as it was happening.
Yeah, which is tough.
When you do that, history is written by the winners.
Right.
Is what they say.
Well, what I point people to in the documentary when they say, well, Billy's just a jerk and he did this and he did that, and he goes, as the conversation steers that way, I say, well, you remember the scene where he's packaging up the video to send with the older woman to the competition?
Right.
That is not video that's sent from Billy's camp to the documentarians.
No, not at all.
They are at Billy's house,
right,
filming him doing this. So if they don't have at least a working relationship with Billy at that point,
right,
how do they get access to his house?
Right.
How do they get, and the other thing is that you need releases to be able to use somebody's image. Mm-hmm. And at no point do we see Billy blurred out. At no point do we see them, working to not show his face but represent his image.
Right. They get
right. And here's the thing too: is that Billy, as a personality and understanding how it works, is that all press is good press, basically. And that if you're going to paint me as a villain, it's fine. It's not a big deal, because people are still going to. Because Billy sells other products. He doesn't use his image to do it, but he has hot sauces. He has a restaurant chain that his parents own very successfully.
Right.
That all that does is keep his name in the limelight, and he moves more product that way.
There you go.
Billy understands.
People want to come to the villain. They want to see the villain. Like, oh, this is the guy who was the bad guy in the movie. Oh, his food's pretty good. It's
pretty good. Yeah. I mean, it's odd. There's the scene in the restaurant where they're, they show him, and apparently Billy's avoiding him. But that's not really true. to hear Billy tell it, he sat and had dinner with Steve Wiebe and his family and bought them dinner at his own restaurant, the restaurant that he owned in Florida, when Wiebe came down to play in a competition, and Billy actually played in that competition. He just didn't do it beside Wiebe, because when you have someone like Billy that knows kind of their value, if you don't, as a convention, you don't owe it to anyone to present yourself without recompense or setting parameters, which is where he kind of fell out with the documentary, is that, you want to do these things and you want these interviews. Well, how's the end product going to be? Well, we can't show you that. Well, then I'm not going to participate. You basically use the only leverage that you have. But if you need me to sign a release, I don't care, because I know as people see my face and attach that to a recognition, that I will. Right,
it won't matter.
It'll help.
I'll still benefit from it.
Right.
As long as he doesn't go crazy and try it.
Yeah.
But so far, it seems like he's been okay in that realm. But that was definitely one of the questions I had. Was when I was watching the documentary and they kept saying like Wiebe literally in tears because Billy won't show up to the tournament and play him head to head. And there was another very, very short clip where they talked to Mitchell's wife and they asked her, have you ever seen him compete live? And she's like, no, I haven't, never.
Yep.
But I don't know, there's a lot, again, as somebody who works in production, with those eyes on the documentary, it's very easy to see like, you're definitely not, like there's a moment where he passes by Wiebe at the tournament and says something like, best not to spend too much time with certain people or something like that. But you never see his mouth move.
Right.
He's not mic'd up for that.
Right. Obviously he's not mic'd up. Is it a lifted audio? I've never asked Billy specifically about those moments in the documentary. He doesn't talk.
When I saw it the first time, there's no way in my mind I thought that happened. No way.
Because there's no way. What are they doing sitting there with a telescopic mic or a boom mic, anchored over 18 feet,
in this
somehow
arcade,
out of view in this
arcade, and you're
arcade.
not getting a bunch of room noise.
Right. So you have to
excuse us while we talk production and behind the scenes stuff for a second.
But it's important to understand that once someone has you captured, whether it's on video or audio, there's a lot they can do with it to manipulate.
It's true.
Perception, basically, and it's all about perception. It's how you're viewed. So once Billy signs that release, they can use his image any way they really want.
It's true.
And of course, Billy's using King of Kong stuff to sell his hot sauce now. Like, you go to a convention, you go to SFGE, and you look. And I wish I had the bottle with me. I took it home, and the type and everything looks just like King of Kong. So if you're a fan of that and you see it sitting on a shelf, you may think it's Steve Wiebe's hot sauce, but it's actually Billy Mitchell's, and he's making the money off of it.
There you go.
So he understands the business sense of it. Billy's been in it 25, 30 years, so he gets
He's definitely taken the high road on all of it.
Well, look, there's a big difference between that and playing the slow game, and understanding that now with that certain things have been done to besmirch Billy's reputation. And again, this is not from him directly. This is just me waxing poetic, like thought-wise. We may have legal precedent happening. And once that happens, if you're someone that really knows what you're doing, like Billy, that's been a celebrity for a long time, you learn to shut up and proceed with a lot of caution. There's certain things you can and can't say. So I would say that we're getting into very interesting territory about what is a high score, what is it done, where we're starting to approach this idea that Billy's not separate from his scores as an entity now, which is getting scary. If you're someone that's a fan of E-League, that's a fan of these personalities that they present online for Twitch and other things, we're getting into a territory to set legal precedent that's never been established before. We're getting into that weird PewDiePie territory of at what point, legally damage-wise,
do we need to finally step in?
Or are we going to start saying that your internet voice, that internet persona, you can't separate it? Like, it's sort of like that weird Hulk Hogan thing, like the weird Hulk Hogan sex tape thing. And lawyers put a lot more precedent on that case and a lot more importance than other people.
Right.
Because they say, well, Hogan's out there, he's doing stuff. Well, Hulk Hogan is a persona. It is literally a name that he created.
Right. It's not him.
It's not him.
Yeah.
So you've created legal damages against him as a person by using his celebrity against him.
Yeah.
we're entering that territory for video games now. What is a video game score? And if it hurts you commercially, like Billy has commercial entities that rely on his image.
Yeah.
Is he going to be able to sue these sites now for damages because they call him a cheater?
Okay, so let's
it's
pause and get
weird.
more to that. So Steve Wiebe comes in, sets a higher score.
Yeah.
In person at a Twin Galaxies competition, sets a higher score in person.
Yep.
And then the documentary shows it being same day. It couldn't have been, but it was around the same time.
It's so weird. It might be same day, but there have to be all kind of weird coordination for that to happen.
No.
I mean, you were talking about like evil genius levels of diabolical coordination, which
There's no way that happened.
Let's do the lowest common denominator and say that they did, that their timing was that perfect.
Right.
It doesn't change anything.
No. But still, so Billy Mitchell, instead of coming to the same event and submitting his high score in person by actually playing the game in person, instead he sends in a tape of him playing where he sets an even higher astronomical above 1 million points score. And there, in this tape is a VHS tape. Remember, this is the days of analog. This isn't the original, it's a copy. And in the documentary, they really highlight that there are certain points where the tape seems to scrub or have some
scroll and have a lot of tear.
Issues.
There's a lot of issues.
Conveniently right over the score.
Yep.
Convenient, and I'm
no. It's perfectly
convenient.
It's perfectly legitimate to attack those problems. Look,
Yeah.
Billy's tape submission. Number one, personally, Billy says it himself, and they highlight it a lot in the documentary. If you can't do it live, my personal belief is when you look at a Twin Galaxies score sheet of records, they have it broken into 3 categories of MAME, taped, original hardware, and live. Me personally, I don't think the other 2 should exist. This is the purist in me. If you can't do it live in front of people,
absolutely,
you shouldn't do it.
Right.
This is before I knew Billy Mitchell. I always felt that way.
Right.
That me sitting at my house alone, playing a Donkey Kong cabinet and recording it, the precedent is different. I can get a perfect run. Like things can happen timing wise because I've sat there and done 100 tries.
Right.
Doing those 100 tries at my home, where there's a bathroom readily available, where I feel comfortable, is completely different. How many
stress level is way down.
Right. Take it to a real sports analogy, because I try to take it to real athletics just because I think it's easier for people to draw a similarity. You know, a field goal kicker on a practice field by himself can kick a 78-yard field goal, and he just tears it.
Yeah.
You know, and he'll do it 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a row. Oh, well, that should, and it's him going, well, that should be a record. You know, that should be a national record. I just kicked an 80-yard field goal.
Or he kicks 6 and 7 in a row and goes, all right, I know how to do that.
I know how to do that.
Yeah.
Or do you take the record that's done in a game under duress, where he has to get a snap? It's got to be placed. He has to kick with people trying to tackle him. He's got to kick and win.
You never hear them talking about somebody's practice yard runs. Like, that's not a thing.
That's not a thing.
Right.
That's not a thing.
I'm with you. Live, do it live.
Do it live. I've always been a fan of that. I think.
I mean, Bill O'Reilly is too.
Yeah, he is. He is. But sorry, the Bill O'Reilly thing just threw me a little bit. I lost my train of thought. But you know, even with E-League stuff now, it's the idea of, if you're on your Twitch channel and you're an E-League guy, but you're running a private stream and you have this crazy, insane kill streak, or you have a win streak in a fighting game, that's all well and good.
Need a witness.
Even if you have online as a witness, do it in a competition against top-tier athletes.
Right.
Do it against other people that know what they're doing.
Well, then again, those are different. I think, as a devil's advocate thing, you could argue against that. And the reason is that today, a lot of video games, a lot of variables, unlimited variables.
True.
Donkey Kong, those variables are programmed.
True,
they're not going anywhere.
But there is randomness, such as the blue barrel randomness. There is randomness such as bounce, such as timing. And granted, those are set randomness. In fact, to get a score to beat what is now, which Billy and Wiebe don't hold super high scores.
You're not playing against other people directly.
It's you.
Right. It's just you. It's just a pre-programmed game. This is before the days of, the new big thing now for games is to have a procedurally generated game.
Yep.
And that that removes all levels of preparedness from your playing style. And that
True.
Sort of thing. So,
I would say, though, that like to get the Donkey Kong high score, the ultimate high score, what we're talking about now is that since the King of Kong, Donkey Kong has become sort of the gold standard of holding an old school record.
Sure.
And we're at points now where the game is literally breaking, and we're talking about 2 and 3 point differences where you got to get a perfect run. In other words, one of those random runs, the blue barrels have to hit perfectly where you can get the jumps to get the extra points.
Right.
There are certain runs that you can run them perfectly, and certain points are just not available to you to get.
Absolutely.
Because randomly, you didn't hit the cycle
Enemies
correctly.
don't show up in
Enemies
different
aren't
places.
there,
Sure.
and
Okay, so
the game, and that's why the repetition is important, and that's why the recorded score is important too. But that's why I put more weight.
yeah.
That's why I put more weight on the live score. Is that it's the best you can do with the run that you have with people watching you. I tell people go back and look at the Donkey Kong documentary where he's doing it live, where Weeby's doing it live, and mad respect to the guy. He beat the record live with about 20 people literally over his shoulder, breathing down his neck.
Seriously.
Weeby's got this is none of
Then
this
again-
is about
then
or
again,
against Weeby.
If you're looking at it from if they shot those scenes afterwards, who's to say that many people were over his shoulder?
Right, or when he actually set the record. There's a lot of manipulation that can happen. I don't want this to become a thing against Weeby because
Right.
I feel like that's just taking the conversation in the wrong direction. What this is certain sites and certain people using Billy's notoriety to boost their own notoriety by attacking his score. And here's the thing, too. We can argue back and forth. Billy is, the score they removed is 7th or 8th on the list now, the top 10.
Right.
Weeby's score was 5th or 6th. It's way down. Now, we're talking about people that are recording this stuff at home that are where we're talking about those 100-point, 20-point differences.
Right.
Where it's that close.
Right.
Where the problem here is this the wild, wild west of expertise. You have a lot of people saying that they're experts, saying certain things are impossible, saying that certain things have to be this, have to be that, when it's just not true. A lot of Billy's video is wrong, I think. I think sending in the recorded score invites scrutiny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Billy will tell you now that the originals are long gone. Twin Galaxies has been through some ownership change.
And again, at the time, to mess with that would take a lot of know-how.
At
that time.
It would.
That's a lot of know-how.
Well, something else too, and
Today,
people that dive.
it's not a big deal.
Right.
You could make all those changes.
Yeah.
A
Digitally.
Video. Yeah, no problem.
The biggest thing I think that hurts Billy's argument is that, and lacking the original, is that you don't have any audio. And as someone that edits video, you understand that if you want the raw, it's easy to edit the video things, but you'll see the audio cuts. It's easy to see those audio gaps where the video's chopped.
Right.
That's what hurts you, and the audio's missing. And Billy admits to the audio being missing. He admitted it at his panel. He said, I don't know where the original video is. When he sends that one video that you see in King of Kong to the competition, he sends the other one to Twin Galaxies for verification. That's where the original goes. And the original's been lost to the ages. We're talking about it's been through 3 other owners since then, and one of the owners decided that all these old videos in this warehouse need to just go away. We're converting, because he believed everything was converted to digital at that point, and those videos weren't converted. The other thing is by getting rid of that original hardware, you can't see the physical cuts, because we're talking about Scotch tape days of you cut the mag strip and you tape it.
Get out a razor blade and the thing.
And
it's
line
a lot
it
of
up.
work.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
So we're at this thing where it's a he said, she said for sure, but what you can take away is that even the modern Twin Galaxies that pulled down his score admitted that it wasn't MAME. It's been proven.
And so MAME, for anyone who doesn't know, MAME is what? What's the big
So
deal?
MAME
'Cause
is-
we can see back here is your cabinet,
Right.
and there's a big old new sticker that you got at SFG this year, which is the
says
Southern Fried Gaming Expo.
If you get a chance, go. It's one of the biggest expos in the Southeast. It's
For arcades and
for
games.
arcades and
stuff,
games.
Nerdy stuff generally.
Great panels. Billy had a whole panel there. And that's also why I'm a little bit cagey about what to say, when to say it, is that, SFGE is releasing just the raw videos of all their panels on YouTube. So you'll be able to see, hopefully if it gets signed off, and please, if anyone from there is listening, put Billy's, they were recording it, I saw it, put it on the internet for everyone to see what Billy said, because there are other things outside of what we'll talk about today that are personal to Billy's side of things that are better heard from his point of view in his own voice. You'll see a side of Billy Mitchell that you haven't seen. So me doing it secondhand is just not going to give any credence to it.
Right.
But it says not MAME, and what you need to understand about MAME is an emulation software, and I'm sure a lot of people that are familiar with your podcast or understand what emulation software is. You load it up, and
It's
people
Box. It's just software that runs another piece of software.
Yeah, and it can be great. MAME's awesome in preserving arcades. I think that because I run a barcade, a lot of people would think that I'm a purist in that it's only hardware. You can get MAME that are pure ROMless, that are perfect representations of what they had. The bad thing about MAME when it comes to competitions is that you can manipulate timing. You can literally pause MAME as it's running. Like you can pause an emulator because you have an operating system that's acting outside of the actual ROM software. It can just freeze what it's doing, which can give you a much-needed break, which is a huge thing in old arcades. A lot
of people don't realize that
it's a physical. You've been chasing a record. You can speak to the physical aspect.
Yeah. I mean, it's not only that. It's 100% mental too. If I'm standing over here trying to play a game or something, and I got a couple standing behind me and they're just yammering about whatever relationship problems they're having, I'm gonna start doing badly.
Yep.
If somebody comes over and starts talking to me, I'm gonna not focus.
Yep.
And at any point, if you could just hit pause and say, well, "What's the deal? What's going on? Let's try to fix this. Let's use the bathroom. Let's just take a mental break and not stare at a screen for a few minutes." That sort of thing.
And that's also something.
Big deal, because how long does that Donkey Kong record take? A couple hours, yeah?
It can take. I believe it's an hour and 3 minutes if you're running it pure and clean and you're really there and you're jamming and it's all there. I think it's an hour and 3 minutes, but you're talking about just biology breaks. Like, have you seen the Nibbler documentary?
I haven't yet.
So Nibbler's a 1 billion point score, and it takes something insane like 23 hours to beat.
Right.
So you have to rack up enough lives where you can literally just go to the bathroom and come back, because who can go 23 hours without peeing and not have like a major issue?
Right. And Nibbler, by the way, I recently played it for the first time. It's like Snake.
It is.
And so it gets faster and faster and faster, so you'd have to build up a lot of lives to be able to go anywhere, honestly, because those lives kind of start over.
Yeah, I think it maxes at 99. Nibbler had what makes Nibbler important is it was the first 1 billion point score ever set, but it also had a memory bank that was larger than most other games. Donkey Kong, Pac-Man, I'm sure people have seen the stories on that. By the time you're getting to the high frames of those games and record breaking, that the processing is breaking down because the score is literally filling memory bank that it needs.
Right.
And so the game you're playing on half boards, right? You're playing on half boards like by memory, or the game is breaking in front of you. You have
it's
to
only
break
got
the
a couple
game.
kilobytes of memory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Nibbler had a whole processor chip dedicated to its own scoring, and their whole thing was like, we're going to make this thing almost impossible. So what stops Nibbler scores from being maxed out at 999 billion and the game breaking that way is just the biology, the time that it takes to do that.
It's effort. It's a lot of effort.
It's a lot of effort.
It's a video game, but it's effort.
You're talking about 24 hours, 24 to
and
28
plus,
hours.
To get a world record high score, you have to be focused on the game
all the time.
You have to be in the zone all the time.
Exactly.
It's stressful.
I mean, your first really clean run on the Mario Brothers, which Chris has been trying to break the world record on our Mario Brothers cab, which is all natural versus cab. It is tough. It takes a lot of focus. It's tough to you kind of got to sit, but it's not like sitting at a computer, which is. You've
seen me stand over there.
Yeah.
I have to spread my legs wide, so I just stand comfortably at it.
Because a Nintendo versus cab is not. It's not a comfortable cab to stand at. Nintendo...
It's also not comfortable to sit at either.
Yeah, it's too high to sit at and it's too low to stand at comfortably, is the big thing. And I think that doing it live, too, brings that physical aspect into it, which is why I've always respected live scores a lot more. As someone that's tried to do it and had people talking in the background, I mean, look at the Donkey Kong score, and to Weeby's credit, he had someone going around saying someone's about to break Donkey Kong, someone's about to break the score, it's happening, and drew a bunch of guys that were there breaking high scores.
Somebody did that to me.
And invited that scrutiny, and at least the way that it shot, and I was never there, but let's give Weeby the benefit of the doubt, and he did it with educated eyes watching him do it.
Right.
It's impressive. It's impressive to Weeby. I give all the credit in the world to Weeby because the proof's there, at least in the pudding, that guys got mad skills. Billy's got skills. I watched it happen. Billy can have a full-on conversation and play the first 8 frames of Donkey Kong like it's nothing.
Or
like
he's
absolutely nothing.
sitting there running through Pac-Man, and somebody comes up and asks him for an autograph.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, hang on a second. And then, like, puts Pac-Man in a corner, and, like, all the ghosts are like, what do I do?
What do I do? He's totally
like,
invisible.
Where's that thing? Let me just sign this for you real quick. Can somebody get me a drink? And he's like, okay, well, let's just keep playing now. Like, and that's knowledge. Yeah. Holy cow.
That's just years of how to beat the game.
I don't play Pac-Man. I can't. Like, it's tough.
It's
and then
really
he knows
hard.
like every ghost and like how each ghost works, and like, oh, this level, if I pick up the power pellet, it's only gonna give me a power for like a second.
Yep.
And so he has all the ghosts lined up there, and gets them all right there.
Because it's not just
Holy
about,
cow.
so at the highest level too, it's not about just getting through frames. I think that's where a lot of people get away. It's just like, I need to get through the next level. It's not. It's maximizing your points within that level, within that frame.
Which actually, let's go back to Donkey Kong, is how a newcomer, in one way or however you want to look at it, a newcomer came in out of nowhere and blows everybody's score out the water because he's like, you people are doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And so let's
something completely unorthodox, and it just comes down to maximizing the scores within the frames. Once to hear Billy talk about it, or to hear people that are at least in that top 50, top 20, that high area. It's not about how many frames you get through. It's about maximizing your score within the early frames, so that on those later frames you have the patterns down. Because Donkey Kong loops back. Once you get through, I think, about 8 frames, you've beaten the game, quote unquote. It just starts over, and it just holds your score, because those are all just score climber games. So it's about where can you get the extra 100 points on the second frame that you play.
It's ridiculous.
To put yourself ahead of Billy Mitchell's baseline, because it's all baseline. This frame, because it's always been believed that the first frame, the maximum number of points available on that frame is, I can't get it off the top of my head, I think is like 2,800 is the maximum number. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, because you have to sit there and you just jump, and you jump every barrel until the 100 timer times out. I think it lets you jump.
In comparison, like, each barrel only gives you 100 points.
100 points. So at some point, it stops giving you points on each level of the girder. So you have to know that by memory, and then do that every single time, and you'll be through that level 15 or 16. See, that's the difference. It's about maximizing, especially the early levels, the early part of your playthrough. It's about maximizing your points per frame. It's points per frame, points per section of the game. That's all it's about. And even in chasing the Mario Brothers score, you know that there's certain levels where, because you're only allowed 3 lives, because otherwise you could just get infinite lives. There are sections of the games where you get infinite lives. That you have to maximize the points available to you in that level, and then proceed. Like, you could get more points, but it would unvalue your score.
People may not know that in a question block in Super Mario Brothers, it holds a max of 15 coins.
Yep.
You gotta have really good timing to get all 15.
Get all 15.
Oh my gosh.
It's got to be perfect.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. Just like with Donkey Kong, it's about knowing on this frame, and especially later frames, the 3rd, the 4th frame, where you've got spring jumps and other crazy things happening.
Elevators and all sorts
Elevators and all that kind of stuff is where do you get those points from? You have to jump the spring jumps, and they're worth 100 just like barrels. How many of those do I need to jump to be able to maximize my frame here? Because it's about maximizing the frame. That's the verbiage, maximizing the frame, because that's how those games are seen. Just like Pac-Man, it's a frame, first level, which is your first run through. Frame, second level, which is your second burn through.
Frames and levels, gotcha.
Yeah. So it takes on a little bit of a different vernacular, but you're maximizing basically every second that you're in the game. Right. Because you're chasing a score, you're chasing a person, so you need to do the things that...
And you're on a timer.
And you're on a timer
for
with the time that's left.
Yeah.
So you're in a competition really directly with the ghost of somebody else. It's just like Mario Kart or Diddy Kong Racing, or really pick a racer where you can put it in ghost mode and they show the time of the other person. That's what it's about. You're chasing someone else without the benefit of seeing exactly what they do. So you have to memorize someone else's run and go, how can I do that differently?
And then sit there and watch them and go, okay, they messed up here, they messed up here, they messed up here. And then you have to not only do just as well as they did, but you have to do better than they did.
It's more equated to speedrunners, I think. If you watch videos of speedrunners, then it is more of just like blank competition, like that we have going on nowadays, which is great, which is excellent. I think the big thing against Billy is he has a boisterous personality, and people like to paint him as the villain, and people like to paint Weeby as the hero, which is fine. But what's happening now with this score controversy, and as it proceeds forward, is not going to be Billy versus Steve. It's going to be Billy versus whoever, like the people that run the sites, the people that run Twin Galaxies now. That's going to be the battle. And it's also a battle to validate Weeby scores. Some of Billy's scores that are pulled down are boards that Weeby has set records on. So it starts to call into question, do we pull Weeby scores now? Is it the board that's in question? Is it the cabinet that's in question? Or is it the player that's in question? If so, what does the player know? When did he know it? What's his knowledge base? Because that's the other thing. That's the difference I got to right at the top of the show, is there's a difference between modifying a board, modifying a cabinet, and modifying a playthrough, which is your video playthrough. So Billy probably, admittedly, you can look at the video, having talked to him, he played on a modified cabinet. He played on a cabinet that was meant to feed the video to a camera. Right. It ran through a converter. If the board was playing the way it was supposed to naturally, and there's a natural board that hasn't been modified, but you've literally just, the video feed that's going to the monitor, you've spliced it, and it's now a modified cab, even though Billy's playing it on the cab with that video feed, since you've modified the video feed coming out, is his record less valid.
Right.
A lot of people make that argument about MAME. If it's running natural ROMs on natural hardware and I take no breaks, isn't it legitimate? Well, then you get into the mental aspect of, yeah, but just because you ran it clean this time, you have the option to pause if it starts to get bad.
And also,
delete your
like,
video and
you
try
really
again.
There's a lot of things that, if you're going to go into competitive and you're going to start pulling people's scores, there's a lot of things to look at. If a board or a cabinet is modified, how is it modified?
Exactly.
Are the buttons easier to press? Is the joystick different?
Is the travel shorter?
Yeah.
Like, talk about travel on a button. What's the difference between a micro switch and a leaf switch? The travel, the feedback on that. Like,
it's not a very funny joke.
It's modern four-way Jiffy sticks versus old school Nintendo sticks that rely on leaf switches rather than micro switches. There's a lot of hardware questions you have to answer, and how absolutely adamant do you want to get? And people say, well, you should just keep them in sections. Just keep adding new sections that say, this was done on MAME in a modified cab, and then let that record be its own record. I for one, like the idea of unified records. Once you start diluting how the record can be broken, you start diluting what the record is.
And what it means.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm 100% behind
I'm
you
not
on
a
that.
big fan. I'm not a big fan of the columns. And I understand that some people, I just don't have a Donkey Kong cab available to me to play it on MAME. Here's the thing. It's widespread. All those different conventions are available. Practice at home on your MAME. Make it as true as possible, and then go play.
You have 3 days on a convention weekend.
You got 3 days on a convention weekend to nail it down. And if you set one on a convention floor and it's a real cab, trust me, people are going to know. People are definitely going to know. Because the people at the convention are going to want that out there, that it was set there. The other thing is that conventions have motives to modify machines without the players knowing, because having a record set at a convention is a billable asset. It's something you can say that happened at your convention and could possibly happen next year.
Right.
So nothing against conventions that are out there. I have no evidence that anyone's ever done this. But you have to understand that is a stark possibility, especially in the near future, that using machines that maybe have higher clock speeds
or newer hardware.
If
they replace the chip, is that chip better?
Yeah.
Is the chip going to make the game run better?
Right. I mean, you see it once you watch the Nibbler documentary, and people that are out there in web world, if you like King of Kong, watch Nibbler. Nibbler runs into an issue where a guy that breaks the record had a chip swapped on one of his boards because he had a board go out, and it increased the clock speed of his board minutely. But it allowed him physically to beat the record in what would have been impossible on normal hardware. Wow. He beat the record in like 21 hours instead of 23 hours.
Right.
Which calls into question if the board, even though it's running naturally with natural ROMs, if it has an increased clock speed where you don't have the biology issues, is it a legitimate run?
Yeah.
There's a lot of mitigating factors here, especially when you're talking about 40-year-old hardware. There's a lot that's happening. And the cabs that are true, perfect cabs that have never been touched are few and far between.
Right. And then there's another argument that comes up with that. Do you want to put a record on that machine? Because that's not how at this point the components of the board are deteriorated enough where that's not exactly the original game that was released.
Right. What if you have, like, let's say you're playing on an original Donkey Kong, the board's never been modified, and then suddenly, the PIA processor starts to fill up quicker simply because the chip's older and it's starting to go open, and it doesn't have the memory storage that it originally had, or you're having to run it at a higher power. Literally, like the power supply on the cabinet's turned up slightly from 5.1 to 5.3 to run certain chips better. That's going to increase your clock speed a little bit.
There's so many tiny different variables that go into every little thing.
They go into everything that you can attack if you want to.
Yeah.
So there has to be a balance.
So another example is when I'm playing Mario here on your cabinet, I love it.
Yep.
Love playing Mario. They released the same game on the Nintendo Switch eShop under the arcade archives, but I don't play it on there because after playing on your machine enough, I've realized that Mario's looser on your machine.
Yep.
And because he's looser, I can rely on sliding a little bit and making better clearances or something like that.
Yep.
Whereas if I play it on Switch, it's so much tighter and I have to play different.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
And it's the difference between analog. Some of that difference is made up in analog controls. Nintendo Switches are leaf switches, so it's all about switch travel. It's as mechanical as it gets. You've got two copper contacts, and they're
Could
out
just
on
be
thin
that
pieces of metal.
It's the same thing, and that joystick is giving me the sensation of
looser
travel.
play,
Yeah.
versus a digital input that's tight. It literally has just a finite range that it's operating in. Whereas those leaf switches, they bend, they have flex, they're a little. It's called squishy. They're a little squishy, like they're soft, and it's great feedback. That's what I love. Like that one's not MAME, it's not running MAME boards, but I'm running what's called a Jiffy stick. The Jiffy stick on that Donkey Kong that you see right there is running micro switches, not leaf switches. So when someone like Billy comes in and he plays, he knew it immediately. He goes, "This is not an original Nintendo stick." He goes, "It'd be really hard to get a record legitimized on this." I said, "Well, it's 4-way. It's just a micro switch." He goes, it'd be tough."
Yep.
And that's a conversation I had with the man standing right there, and I didn't realize it at the time. And it's just hard to find replacement Nintendo sticks where the shafts aren't bent, the leaf switches aren't just completely played out. I could build something that pseudo reproduces it,
Right.
but then would that be allowed? Even if I did it to spec, it's not an original stick. So, like I said, there has to be kind of a happy medium where you draw the line and say, okay, we're getting into MAME territory. If the records are going to keep proceeding, but I think the big thing that we need to watch out for are people profiteering off of basically attacking other people and ruining their reputations, which is kind of the territory we're in now.
Right. All because maybe you don't like how somebody else acts. Or you want to make money off your own website. You want to do your own thing, and so you got to use somebody else to...
Well, the biggest thing is that scrutiny shouldn't go one way. So, if that forum site is going to say, Billy's score's not real, here's why, then the scrutiny needs to... You invite that scrutiny of, well, who are you personally? What are you doing? What are your motivations? And, well, that's not important. Here's the evidence. Well, here's the evidence of why you're doing what you're doing.
Right.
It starts to call your motives into question because you need to be able to defend those. I have nothing against what they did. The thing is that you don't get to clam up and not take counter opinions and simply say that, well, if it's not on our forum, then it's not a legitimate argument. That's not arguments we're going to entertain. Why? Since when has Twitter not been a legitimate form of self-expression? Since when is Facebook?
President.
Oh, well, those are just opinions.
Off
yeah.
Twitter. So that's
the
official.
White House. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're White House official of the president's dictations. And Twitter's open to public scrutiny. A closed forum where you know what your membership is not. And they're not willing to...
And you can block users that you don't approve of what they're saying in forums.
Exactly.
Admins
can control exactly what they say. So you have this forum site that's not really willing to take Twitter scrutiny and not willing to defend themselves on Facebook or other things and simply cloud out that argument. Twin Galaxies itself is kind of running into that issue where it's a closed house where information goes in and very little comes out. And Twin Galaxies is really struggling to find themselves in sort of a new world. For a long time, they were the gold standard, and you have a lot of fluidity here between people saying, "Well, I'm the legitimate one. Well, we're the legitimate site. Well, we're the new authority. We're this. We're that." And it's going to start coming down to who are the people running these things?
Right.
What are their motives, really? Because we're out of the pure world of Walter Day. We're running out of the baby boomers.
Somebody who wanted to do it out of the genuine good of his heart, like for video game history, this needs to be done.
Right.
These people don't have the same mindset.
Right. I mean, Walter Day is basically, they call him Saint Walter, and he's basically an old school hippie. Like they touch on a little bit in Donkey Kong,
singer.
Who is Walter Day, who did it basically because it hadn't been done, and he felt like these guys needed representation.
I like what he said. I just started writing down scores.
And that's perfectly legitimate. But now you have these forums that are dedicated only to Donkey Kong scores, how to beat them, and they're populated by members, and that's their only motivation. That site benefits greatly from Billy Mitchell's downfall, essentially. So that's what it's about. It's about I don't say delegitimize those kind of things, but viewers need to take a critical eye to what are they doing, and start to call into question their motives, because these are humans doing this.
Right.
We're
and this brings it back to the point you were touching on before we got started, was about how we're in a really weird place right now socially, where we don't know where our news, what our source of our news is, and what motives are behind why people are saying a certain thing or why they're broadcasting a certain way, that sort of thing. So it's a very weird and slippery time for everyone. Nobody knows what's real.
We are in the era of the slippery slope.
Yeah.
We aren't just living on the slope. We're no longer on the precipice of, if this keeps happening, it's a slippery slope. Ladies and gentlemen, we are on the slope. Right. And video games this argument is a very moot argument to the overall of what news is, but it has the same strokes of you now have to. You can't take things at face value. We're out of the era of going, this is the New York Times. They know what they're doing. We're beyond that now. It's, who is this writer? Because the New York Times, these forum sites are basically taking one person's opinion, and it is an opinion. Even if it's an expert opinion, it is an opinion.
Right.
And saying, that's news. News is no longer factual. News is what is relevant.
Right.
And Billy's thing, he's being attacked by people.
And a lot of it is, news is what gets out first and what's said first.
Yep. And we're in the area of now the podcast, where people have very loud voices thanks to the internet. And if you have something controversial like Billy's score not being legitimate, it legitimizes you as the expert, more so than you as the expert delegitimizing someone else. So now you have to pepper that personality. They have to be put up against each other right now, and it basically starts turning into a shouting match. And it's a sad thing, because especially in this realm where you don't have a lot of independent experts, and I'm not an expert. I've said a lot today about what my opinion is on things.
You're more knowledgeable than anybody I know about the innards of arcade machines and how they work and that sort of thing.
Right, and I can say from listening to Billy speak, and even from King of Kong and sources that are seen as sources that are used to delegitimize him, Billy has very little working expertise of how the boards work. He knows how the game works and what is required for the game to do that. He understands that the game crashes because of the processors and the memory, but he doesn't quite understand how the board works. This is not a guy that can modify a board.
It's also, what does he care?
Right.
That's not what he's out to do.
He's out to play the game well.
He's out to play it and get his name on a leaderboard somewhere and say, that guy right there, that is the number one Donkey Kong player.
Right.
He's not the type of person who wants to modify things.
No.
I mean, if you look at him in King of Kong, like you said before, he's got this very superior attitude. He really does.
Yep.
But you know what? It's because he knows what he knows. He knows he's the best, and he knows that all the things that they're bringing against him is BS.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Billy would know straight up if he was playing a main board almost instantly. You got to think the guy's done it his whole life. Granted, in the King of Kong era, Billy had not played, and he'll admit to this, almost 10 years before King of Kong came out. When he heard they were making a documentary, he didn't participate in the documentary because he was out of practice. They're like, oh, we asked him to do this, we asked him to play here, we asked him to do this. A lot of that negativity comes from early interactions with Billy from that film crew, because Billy's like, I haven't played in 10 years. I've had the record, I haven't had it. He doesn't have...
That was one of the questions I had written down as to why he doesn't come and play against Steve at a lot of these other opportunities, and it's just because, and I feel that, where if you're not at your best, some people will argue and say, man, just get out there, just do the thing, just play him. But that's not what it is.
No.
If you are somebody who holds who you are, your production value, your signature, the things you put your name on in such high regard, you're not just going to go out there and throw something out there.
And here's the other thing. I think a lot of people have this idea that somehow Billy has a lot of Donkey Kong stuff like in his house, like maybe like a bunch of his. He doesn't even have a copy of the Time magazine that he's on the cover of. He doesn't have a Donkey Kong machine in his house. He doesn't. He doesn't own a Donkey Kong machine. He doesn't own a single arcade. Those are things that are in his past. So when all this stuff started coming back up, Billy's whole argument was when the time comes, when someone beats it, if I feel like I need to, I will beat it again because someone will beat my score. The Donkey Kong score that he set, that was the record for 25 years, was set at a Time magazine shoot because the guy that originally broke the record, Billy did not believe he did it. He felt it was a lie.
Yeah.
And the guy said, "Nuh-uh, I really did it," basically, because you're talking about 15-year-old kids. And Billy said, "I will beat your score right now." And so this is with a Time magazine shoot, watching him do it. He set that 900 score, completely blew the other guy's score out of the water. And all this is the King of Kong. So if that's your argumentative piece, all this is documented in that film.
I think, if anything, the fact that he could be there at that time, lay down a challenge, and then follow through on the challenge at that time, I think, if anything, that's the legitimate. Yeah, that legitimizes him. And that says that he's got that talent.
He's got that talent, and that's the thing is that I don't think Billy would want to set the record on a main machine.
Why would you?
Why would you? Yeah. If you have the skill set to do it without it, then why would you do it in an illegitimate way? Why
would you sit here and make P.F. Chang's frozen bag of thing for your family for dinner when you have rice and chicken and teriyaki sauce
and the skill set to do it?
Right.
If you're
Gordon Ramsay does not buy frozen
Gordon
crap.
Ramsay does not buy B.F. Chang prepackaged. He does not.
Right. So Billy Mitchell does not play on main machines.
Exactly. It's
end of story.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. And so to say that Billy somehow modified it now, the video, all that kind of stuff, you can say, well, he's very caught up in his image, of course. But I don't know if Billy could set the record on a main machine that you modified to be able to pause, or that you modified with a faster clock speed because he's so set in the pattern of what has to happen. A lot of these old games, and you've played them, rely so heavily on pattern that once you start changing clock speed, stuff gets very cagey very quickly.
And that's the other thing, is that you talk to a tennis player, you talk to a runner, basketball player, football player, anybody who has done their due diligence in their area of expertise. You know what they say, like, you're considered a professional when you have like 1,000 hours practice or something like that. At that point, you know what you're doing so much. You have spent so much time looking and just like enveloping everything that you're working on and what you're doing, that when a basketball player goes to another court, the air is different.
Yeah.
My head feels different. The court is unlevel.
Right.
There's all these tiny, that us in the stands, we don't know.
We don't know.
Or like, why do you have to play the game there? Play it over here.
When you have that much practice, it's the game itself, the patterns of what you have to do are automatic. It's dealing with the minute changes that separates the different level of professionals, basically. Like, the environment has changed slightly, adapt. It's how you adapt.
Right.
So now we're going to say that Billy Mitchell, for some reason, because he couldn't do it the way Weeby was doing it, decided to scrap everything.
And 10 years after
the fact, I'm now going to have a custom. This is before MAME was very popular. You were talking about you would have to take a Windows 2000. We're talking about like the era of 2000 XP, build a MAME machine that's running Donkey Kong with a video feed out that he's then going to edit, or that is going to build MAME. And if they built MAME, it would be without an interface. We're not talking about the MAME machines we have today with interfaces and layovers where you just click a scroll and go pause.
Right.
You know, roll back 5 seconds. Those don't exist. You would have to code it at that time.
Right.
That's the other reason that the MAME argument falls apart, is that the era of Billy's video, the interfaces didn't exist to modify it in the way people think that they do now. They're putting Billy's video, a 2008 video, in the context of modern times. In 2008, technology was vastly different.
And like we were saying, like, you have to have incredible knowledge.
Incredible knowledge.
To put the edits together as quick as he did.
As quick as he did.
That's the other thing, is if Steve Weeby sitting here saying that, like, oh, on the same day this thing showed up.
That's the other thing, is that you have to admit.
And then they want to come by and say that he edited it. No effing way.
That he set a million score. So what's the other argument? And I always ask people, so what's the counter argument? That Billy actually did set a 1,000,000 point score, which is what This is my personal conspiracy theory of what happened. I haven't brought it up to Billy. He hasn't refuted it.
Let's hear it.
My personal conspiracy theory is that Billy, about 15 years before the King of Kong was done, because he did have a Donkey Kong cabinet gifted to him, sat in his home and played his Donkey Kong over and over and over and over in an attempt to beat his own score.
Right.
He did so, and he recorded it. He then took that tape and put it in his closet and said, which is why he was so comfortable getting rid of his machine, when someone beats my score,
right.
I have a million two score.
It's in my pocket.
It's in my back pocket. I don't have to do anything.
Right.
I
will then just throw that card down.
I will then just throw that card down because he was in his best. 15 years ago, he had a Donkey Kong cabinet. He had just set or at that point, 20 years ago, and he had been, let's say he had it in his house for 5 years, doing nothing but playing it back to back to back.
Why would you go ahead and release that? Why?
Why?
Because
there's no point.
There's no point. You already have an astronomically high score, right? And so why put that out and set it even higher?
And Billy admits on the King of Kong, or will admit in person, that when he set that record during the Time magazine shoot, he knew a higher record was possible.
Sure.
He knew a higher score was possible. He just didn't have it that day.
When you're a football player, you're going across the field, you know all the opportunities that are before
available
you at
to you.
that moment.
Yep.
And when you see your path change and you're like,
should have did that. Yep. So Billy probably had one in his home. He's starting to make a lot of money, and he plays the game over and over and over again.
Like you said, he's got it modified so that he can output it to a source. And every time he plays, he just sits down and hits record and then plays.
And plays for however long the tape lasts, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Just keeps banging out games. And he finally gets
eventually he finally gets one that's a world record, and he goes, okay, that's it.
Cool.
Pause. Well, not on
the game,
right?
But he takes that video. He takes the video out, cuts out all his other failures around it, which is why the video appears edited, even though.
Sure.
But takes that original video, and what does he do? He does the responsible thing. He runs 3 or 4 copies, puts one away, and has 3 or 4 copies floating around in a closet. Sells his machine, and goes, if anyone ever beats the record, they got to beat 1-3, and he walks off. And nothing ever happens. So he never plays the game for 10 years, 15 years.
Again,
and suddenly someone beats you. Why would you? Why would you make it known that you beat your own record?
Right. No.
You wait for someone else to do it.
No. Sorry,
so
that's not how
Steve Wiebe beats he hears that Steve Wiebe's going to this competition. Wiebe has beaten the record at his home. But now Wiebe's going to a competition to beat it. And he's got the film crew with him, the same film crew that has slighted you, that has been working against you. So you pull it out, you blow it off, dust it off, and you go, I don't know if Wiebe's going to beat the score or not.
Yeah.
But while the film crew's there, and Wiebe's making an attempt, I'm going to send one of my copies with this sweet old lady I've been training to beat a record.
Because when you are playing cards with somebody, when do you lay your trump card down? When somebody else has a hand that they think might beat you. And that's when you... So it wasn't even the timing, because this is taking it all at base level. That's a strategy. And if his parents were into that, and they were the ones that taught him all the things that are into that, I mean, his parents play poker, definitely, that's absolutely a possibility.
I mean, that's the thing, is that he knows the film crew's there with Wiebe, that Wiebe has beaten a record unofficially, that Twin Galaxies is trying to confirm his home record, because you should see it in the King of Kong that Wiebe's record's beaten at his house, and there's all these people they paint it as there's all these people trying to dispute his record that are Billy Mitchell disciples. It's not.
Yeah.
It is... Where Wiebe beat the record, they come to his home.
Garage.
What you have to understand is that Wiebe's board was never taken to a convention. His cabinet was never played by anyone else. So there's no one to say that's a true board. So Wiebe submits a video. Twin Galaxies has no one to corroborate his evidence. He's also in the Northeast, which is near Nintendo headquarters.
Right. He's in Redmond.
So it's very easy for them to call Billy, him to watch the video and go, seems legit to me, you should have someone check his board out, and have someone from Nintendo that knows what a board is. That actually, here's a tidbit from Billy's panel, the record that Billy set, which is what tells me that the time difference, someone from Nintendo confirmed that the board he beat that record on was a legitimate thing.
Yeah.
So if you're 15 years removed, then, all that stuff gets lost. But so they send someone to look at Wiebe's board, because if Wiebe's board is legitimate, then Wiebe's run is legitimate. You can come over here.
What's up?
Participate.
Your shirt's actually really relevant, because we were talking about SFGE.
There should be. I'll come look at it. I got to work.
I think that's a good point to kind of wrap things up. I'm going to step behind me.
Yeah.
I'm going to put this camera in front of the machine so that anything that I do is undisputed.
Nice. Excellent.
And,
Unbroken.
This has been a really great talk. I think a lot of people are going to have a better understanding of Billy Mitchell. I think there's a lot that goes on in the background that wasn't brought to light, that wasn't explained.
Right.
And I think, personally, after watching the documentary this morning, it seems like Weeby's a guy who just had his candy taken away from him.
Yeah, a little bit. I would say, look, the record now from both Weeby and Mitchell is 7 or 8 people removed. If you haven't seen the documentary or it's been a long time since you've seen it, I would say first thing to do is look it up on IMDb and then research the people that shot the movie.
There you go.
Check out the personal relationship and then watch the movie again. And you'll get a bit of a different perspective, because I had a totally different perspective than my business partner Whitney did, because she researched those things and had a totally different opinion of Weeby. I still have a slightly different opinion from her of Weeby, but you're right. I mean, it comes out to sour grapes a little bit, but Weeby's record, even if you take the one that's shown where it stood for like 8 seconds, it's still a record. It's still impressive.
It's still legitimate. He said it. He has talent. He's absolutely talented.
He did it
guy.
with people watching him do it.
He's great with his hands.
It's impressive. It is. He's great with his hands.
I'm not saying that Steve Weeby is not talented. All I'm saying is that I think a lot of people are pointing at Billy Mitchell as the bad guy without knowing a lot of details about what.
Right.
And I'm not. And this isn't me saying I know what happened. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
You just gave us a great possible theory.
Right.
As to what happened.
Right.
Billy Mitchell's never come out and said
that that's what's happened.
Because again, he doesn't. He's the kind of person who doesn't feel the need to defend himself.
No, he doesn't. He lets his play speak for itself. And
he was such a quiet and reserved guy.
Yeah. Look at the downtime when Mitchell's score ranked supreme. How much celebrity did he really get off of it? He kind of fell to the wayside and disappeared
really quickly too.
Not just because arcades did, but because he didn't make a point to do those things. He didn't make a lot of appearances. He didn't feel the need to.
He wasn't touring.
And
why would you?
And now you look at all this controversy. Billy's hopped on the band. Billy's hopped on it. He's going to Australia. He's going to Europe. He's doing a whole resurrection tour of Billy Mitchell. He's gained more from this controversy, really. I think the personal attacks are what hurt him the most. And just like anybody else, any athlete says, critique what I do on the field. But, that doesn't relate to who I am as a person.
Yeah.
Billy Mitchell's not a role model. To get back to the old thing, he's not meant to be. He was a guy that was very good at video games, and that if that's what you want out of your heroes, pick better heroes. Fictional heroes work out a lot better because they're written by flawed humans that like in flawed people. If your role models boil down to real people, you're going to run into a lot of problems.
Have a bad time.
Yeah, even if you keep. I mean, it's just
doesn't matter who it is.
Doesn't matter who it is. Nobody's perfect. And you've got. And with the internet age and the whole rash of new information, we have to be very, very careful about what we consider now to be fact.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what an expert opinion is.
I think if this last 5 years has taught us anything, I think we definitely need to see. We need to take anything that we see or hear with a big grain of salt.
A big grain of salt. And understand that...
And we need to understand this is just one side of a story.
Right. Almost everything you have now is opinion. There's very little considered irrefutable expert evidence now. You have to understand, too, that just the Billy Mitchell thing, on its surface, at its face, it is a he said between the guy that has a track record of beating the game, but is maybe not a personable guy that you would like to have a beer with. I would encourage people to try, because Billy's actually a really great guy. He presents a persona.
Right. He looks grumpy.
Yeah. He looks grumpy, and that's all part of it. If you ever see him, come to SFGE or go to one that he has a panel on and meet him at the table when he's signing stuff. Incredibly nice guy. He knows what sells. And the show needed an antagonist, and he saw what they were doing, so he just fed into it. He's like, if that's what they want to do, I've signed the release. Like, I'm going to just make my billing off of it.
Good on him for not coming out and being like...
Yeah, he didn't... His big thing was, he said, well, if you guys are going to do this, then I'm going to use... Like, if you look at his hot sauce, he puts out a King of Kong brand hot sauce that looks like... it uses the movie's
He shows it like several times. Almost all his interviews are in the restaurant.
So he just
Pushing
takes
it
the
hard.
imagery. Yeah, so he just steals the imagery, and that was kind of the trade-off.
Yeah.
Like the documentary company was
And
like,
again,
well, that's not
he's
the
done-
intention.
He's done with competitive gaming at that time. Whatever, this restaurant, this hot sauce is my new thing.
Yep.
This is what I'm doing. So you do what you want to do with your documentary. I'm still going to be here and
Promoting
all the,
this, doing this.
and all of your stuff
Right.
is going to just bring people over
And
here.
from information
where then
from the
he
panel,
can tell the real
right,
story.
where he can tell the real story, and information from the panel, and information from having personal conversations with him. The 3 times I've done it is that Billy is now practicing. He's back in the competitive scene, and it's scary to think. Let's say 5 years from now, Billy actually sets the record again and owns it. What then? You know, and what's going to happen in the meantime? Because we're into the lawyer stage now of where we're talking damages, and this is like I said, it's getting an unprecedented territory of, you know, there's going to be gamers, Twitch streamers, YouTubers that are when something happens in another 5 years, that are going to point to this as
Because
precedent.
that's how court cases work.
That's how court cases work. What can you prove? Who else has done it?
Exactly.
That's
Well, what's
important
the
thing.
history of this case?
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's
What's
our
the
basis.
history of your argument?
Yeah.
And so we're going to see precedent established, and that's the interesting thing. I for one, it's a exciting time for gaming in general, because even the older arcade games now are coming back into vogue. At least arguments about them. That's what the controversy has done. And it's just, again, it's like you said, big grain of salt when you hear news stories. Understand that experts aren't necessarily experts. You need to, what you consider an expert is put under a microscope and you go, okay, I'm going to trust that guy's opinion. Because that's what you're doing. When you regurgitate those things on Facebook.
And again, it's always the first thing you hear.
It's always the first thing you hear. It's always the first thing you hear, and it's easy to trust.
Don't trust an arcade by its cabinet.
Nope.
All right, man. Okay. Well, thanks for sitting in with us, and we'll catch you later. He's off to run some businessy things and that sort of thing. So I'm going to go over here and play some Donkey Kong.